Dear participants, good afternoon, good evening, good morning, good night, and welcome. It is my privilege to welcome you to this town hall meeting where we will be talking about how we try and do our best to build a caring community together here at UWC Lillejan. My name is Stefan Johansen, and I have been given the opportunity to be your host today in my role as a Attune parent here. Along with me, I have two of our students, Jade and Rue, who have given some of their time to volunteer as peer listeners over the past several months. And a little bit later, we will get to hear from them directly about what that role entails. But first, it's my pleasure to also welcome Michele Blackwell, our resident psychologist and psychotherapist, who will share with us something about how we can facilitate the emotional development of teenagers. So in our time together now, we will hear from Michele first, then I will add a little input on the role of a Attune parent and what sort of community we are trying to create in our residences. And finally, we will get to hear from Rue and Jade about the peer listener support. Throughout these talks, you are very welcome to ask questions. We will be rounding off our time together with a little question and answer session. So you are most welcome to ask your questions either in the chat or by pressing the Q&A button. And hopefully we will be able to address whatever questions arise by the end of the town hall. We have 1 hour scheduled together, but we will be flexible as is needed. So without further ado, please allow me to introduce our first speaker. Michele, welcome to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Stefan. Thank you for the introduction, and thanks also to Jade and Rue for being with us to discuss about the challenges of adolescence, and also a big thanks to the organizers of this town hall meeting. It's always a pleasure to be here and to speak and to interact with you. As Stefan was mentioning, I would like to reflect today with you on the challenges of being an adolescent, and speak about the lives of adolescents in a learning community, what it means today to go through this turbulent period of life in these turbulent times, and well, I mean, focusing on what it means for our students to come to Lillejan and then studying, learning, meeting new friends, new teachers, doing sports, having long conversations with each other. Adolescence poses some challenges for the teenagers themselves and for the adults who live with them and who take care of them. So how can we face these challenges, and what does it mean for us to try to build a caring and a facilitating community for the students, or both for both staff and students. Now, I have the feeling that sometimes we forget what it has been for us to go through our own adolescence, to discover a new world or to rediscover the world, the same world that we knew when we were children, that at some point changed or acquired new shapes, new flavors, and new attractions, new exciting aspects, but also, of course, new challenges, several ups and downs, moments of despair, new insights, new bonds, and so on. When I was reflecting on this topic, and I was maybe thinking about what to say, it came to my mind the soundtrack of a famous movie about childhood and adolescence, Boyhood. Boyhood is a movie about the life of a young man from infancy to his first day of college, in which the main character, Mason, he has to adapt to many different and challenging situations, the divorce of his parents, the new relationships of his parents, and his own relationships, and then school, friends, peer pressure, of course, the disappointments of life, the frustrations and dangers of some situations. And now the lyric of a song of the soundtrack says, "I don't want to be your hero. I don't want to be your big man." Now, I don't want to be your hero, I guess that this could be the words of many teenagers, yeah, and probably also this is a point that poses an important challenge both for teenagers and adults, and that we need to explore and reflect on. These words, I don't want to be your hero, make me think about mainly about expectations. I mean, expectations of teenagers. So, do they expect that they are supposed to be heroes for adults, or also our own expectations, and what do we expect? Maybe we expect our young people and our students to be heroes. I mean, this as parents, teachers, educators, psychologists. We expect them to give their best and to follow certain paths. And we find it difficult to understand what is happening when this is not the case. Last year, I think it was like more or less in this period, in another town hall meeting, we were speaking about the nature of adolescence and about the differences between childhood and adolescence. And we were saying that children are mainly compliant with their caregivers, even the most oppositional ones. They show some degree, some levels of compliance. And for example, they're happy when their parents are happy, or when the adults seem happy about their behavior. So they would expect guidance, protection, and they seem vigilant about the reactions of the adults around them. Adolescents, on the other hand, they start to choose for themselves. They start to say no to their caregivers. They express their own preferences that are different from the ones of the adults. They want and need to spend time on their own, doing their own things with their friends. They need their private time. And I would say that the economy of their bonds and interactions with adults change. And we can add that, for example, children get anxious when their parents are absent or when they are not there with them, while teenagers may even experience the opposite condition, in which they may become anxious when their parents are maybe too much present in their lives, when they try to give too much guidance or too much structure. So from this point of view, I think that we can say that teenagers are, so to speak, intrinsically divergent. Yeah, what I mean is that they are called to follow their own desires, to explore their own nature or their own life. Therefore, from this point of view, adolescence is the period of life in which like time comes for young people to start making their own choices, to experiment their own decisions, to start trying things. And as we know, trying things is how we learn. Now, we say many times that adolescence is stereotypically a period of change, and this is true. Becoming adolescents means encountering a new world, and this implies feeling a foreigner in our own body, in our own skin, in our own mind. Today, we have much more information about the physical, emotional, and social changes that take place from puberty onwards. But much more than this, adolescence is a period of divergence. It's a period in which every person starts to express their own uniqueness. And I mean, I think that this is a very important point to take into account when we interact with teenagers. And I would say that it is essential also from the point of view of the UWC experience, based on the idea of celebrating differences and taking personal responsibilities. We look for young people who are able to bring their own difference, their own divergence, their own ideas, their own actions in the community. Now, I think at this point we should ask an important question. What is our attitude towards the divergence of teenagers? Or we can ask, what is our attitude towards young people? How do we represent our relationship with them, our interaction with them? Or how do we see, let's say, children and their development through adolescence on the road to become adults? I would say that in many cultures, we see children as, let's so to speak, our creatures that need to be guided. A child is a creature that is born in a relationship or in a family and slowly grows to become more and more independent. And from a certain point of view, this is true. But maybe we can also question this point of view and consider another perspective. Toby Nathan, who is a French psychoanalyst who has worked with people coming from different cultures, he speaks about the idea coming from some African cultures of a child intended not as a product of their caregivers, but intended more as a foreigner sent to their caregivers, and that their caregivers need to adopt. We are usually familiar, I guess, with the opposite idea. A child is our own product, and we have the fantasy that we can shape them and guide their destiny, protect them from dangers. We can accompany them along a process of separation. But actually, a child is a foreigner. Right? A child is an alien, is a gift coming from far away that brings change in our life, in the life of a family, in the life of caregivers. They bring disruptions. And I mean, I think that this manifests again, maybe in an even more powerful way during adolescence, because young people bring with them their own style, that sometimes it's like difficult to understand, like being up until late at night or interacting with their own way with technology or speaking their own slang. And this is a powerful disruption. It's always a surprise, which is beautiful, but it can also be challenging. Now, this being said, if we consider adolescence a time of divergence, in order to understand also what the challenges of adolescence are and how we can facilitate the emotional development of teenagers, I think we need to consider also the context in which we live, the way the context is functioning, the dimension in which young people grow up, the emotional environment which hosts their development, and I think for which we can say that we are all responsible. And well, I mean, I think that from this point of view, I think that we can say that our time is a time of constant and permanent competition. Marcuse spoke about what he called the performance principle. It's like if in our world, and I guess this is even more true in the globalized world, we are obliged to perform, to be efficient machines. And I guess it's not only by chance that it is more and more common today to find hyperactive children or hypomanic people, where hypomania refers to a condition of increased activity and energy, of an inflated self-esteem, a decreased need for sleep, flight of ideas. Today, I would say that we all find it difficult to stop and think, because we know that those who run faster win. And the world becomes like a stage on which we think that we have to exhibit ourselves. It's like if we have to play our role and we have to participate in a spectacle that is going on, and those who can be on the scene, they win. And I think that this scenario brings inevitably to celebrate the individual and not the relationships and the connections and the community that we try to create in our life. The point is, I think that in this scenario, there is like no space to fail. And I mean, I'm not speaking about big failures that we all want to avoid, but I think that even small failures are scary, like getting a bad mark or a conflict with a friend, or rethinking about what we like and what we dislike. You know, I like maths, but then now I'm getting passionate about theater or arts. Now, it seems that we are not allowed to stumble or to change direction. We are not allowed to go through a period of crisis. But the point is that adolescence is a time in which we may feel disoriented. We may stumble. We may need to explore different possibilities. And I think that this is essential from a psychological point of view, because adolescence is like the period in which we start to question ourselves and try to understand who we are, what is going on in our lives, in our choices. We can fall and get up again and then sway and then move on and learn and rethink what we are looking for. And this requires, I think, one thing, time, or maybe we can say like two things, like time and tolerance. One more point, I think that we also live in a time in which we cultivate the myth of problem solving and quick fix solutions. Anytime there is a problem, we look for a fast solution using probably a mechanical metaphor or representation of things. You know, if like in a machine a piece breaks, then I can substitute it and then the machine works again, and I have to do this as fast as possible because I have to run again. But I guess this is not how we work. This is not how our minds function, how our emotions work. Because anytime there are signs or symptoms of distress, I think we need time to decipher them and then to understand what we are looking for. I think that like many symptoms of distress that we observe today, especially among teenagers, but not only, are intertwined with this scenario that I'm trying to describe: depression, panic, eating disorders. Many depressive conditions, for example, they reveal that teenagers sometimes lose contact with their own desires, or they don't have the chance to explore their own desires, or to respect their own timing, or they try to comply with expectations again and models that do not belong to themselves. They try to function as machines, as efficient machines, academically, socially, with their studies, their friends, in their relationships. They try to collect victories, but at some point they may also fall, or they may feel energy deprived. They may feel that what they're doing does not make much more sense anymore. So, I mean, of course, like I don't want to go into details of specific examples of psychological distress, like depressive disorders or anxiety disorders. We could go into details, but I think that we don't have the time now. And I think it's also like more interesting to focus on the general attitude, the general scenario in which we live. The point is that on which like I want to focus, and I think that we can also go on with the discussion, also getting to know the points of view of Stefan and Andrew and Jade. In every developmental process, there can be growth and transformation only when there is also space for mistakes. For the possibility to wander, to encounter our own imperfections, where we have time to understand. Now, sometimes this time is not there, but on the other hand, I think that there is no development without such a journey in which we may have the time and possibility to understand what we desire and what we are looking for, who we are, and so on. So I think it is important to consider these points. We cannot speak about emotional development focusing only on individuals and not considering the scenario, the context in which we live. We know that mental health and that well-being, and that our choices like depend not only on us as individuals, but on the interaction between us and the context in which we function, in which we live. Now, I think it is important to consider and to process these points. Adolescence is a period of divergence. Any adolescent can legitimately say, I don't want to be your hero. Insisting too much on performance, on problem solving, on quick fix solutions, on mainly insisting on a rational and linear idea of development is not an ideal recipe to facilitate their emotional development, because I guess normalizing things will prevent us from expressing our creativity, and we know that our development is not linear, is somehow like a rhizome, like the roots of a tree going in different directions and at different speeds, depending on many variables and circumstances. But I think we can say more. If we process this complexity, if we familiarize with this complexity, with the need to familiarize with our desires, our imperfections, our timing, this will prevent many issues and also will allow students and staff to give a creative contribution to the communities in which we live. And I think that this awareness is the way to follow to establish also a more honest relationship with teenagers, which can actually give an important contribution to facilitate their emotional development, their learning process, and also our, I would say, learning experience, their well-being and our own well-being. We can like never consider like them as separate from us. I think that what we are saying also applies not only to them but to all of us. I would say that the challenges of adolescence are also somehow our own challenges. They remind us that we do not control everything, that we also need evidently to accept our own divergence, our own imperfections, and use it to build a creative interaction with the external world. Thank you. Then I give the floor back to Stefan. So now I'm like curious to hear like what he has to say, and also what Ru and Jade, how they will contribute to our discussion. And then I guess we'll all be happy to answer your questions and have again, even here, like a creative interaction with all of you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dan Michele, for some very interesting thoughts. Yeah, I can see both some really real strengths in what we are trying to do here, and also how what you're saying is reflected in some of the challenges we see. So when I was asked to say a little bit here, I've also been reflecting a little bit on how do we try to create this caring community in the middle of a practical everyday life. So my reflections might have a slightly different approach to this, but hopefully together they will help paint a picture of what it is we're trying to do. So in the invitation that was sent out for this town hall today, the little section that I'm mentioned in is titled House Parents, Creating a Caring Community. But if you read the description underneath, my job is described as being a physics teacher and a Attuned parent. And until now, you will also have heard me use this term Attuned parent rather than house parent. Of course, that's really just maybe the same description in two languages. But this word tune, I will admit, I have a very limited understanding of the Armenian language. But as far as I have come to understand it, this word can be translated into English in two slightly different ways. And one of them is house, as tune can mean simply a building of some sort. But the other one, a tune, can mean home. And to me, this second translation is really a very key descriptor of what it is we would like these residential buildings we live in to represent. Physically, all of us, we spend most of our time on this beautiful campus area we have. This year, very much so, but most of us are still leaving our rooms or our apartments in the morning to go to school or to go to work somewhere else on campus. And when we have ended our school day or ended our work day, we return home, much like we would do if maybe we were still in our home country going to a regular day school. So I think for our students, as well as for us as residential staff, these Attuned buildings, they are actually our home. We live here. We live here side by side in slightly different types of accommodation, but we have a very common interest in being somewhere that feels comfortable, somewhere that is safe, and somewhere that is homey. At the same time, of course, we live in shared buildings. It's definitely the home of our students just as much as it is the home for the staff. And it is crucial for all of us that we succeed in making that work for everybody. To create a caring community, that must be a shared responsibility. Of course, the Attune parent has, we could say, the professional responsibility. They are the person who is hired to and who is paid for ensuring that there is a good residential experience. But just like in a smaller family setting, everyone needs to play their part in order for the community to be a good one. We try very hard to create an atmosphere where trust is a key value. We, of course, encourage our students to trust us. We work hard on building this trust and on maintaining this trust in the things that we do and the things that we say. We want the students to know and understand that they are not alone. What kind of support the individual students need, well, that can vary a lot. Some will feel happy and will experience to be seen if you give them a smile as you pass them in the hallway. I think everybody enjoys someone asking, how was your day? What did you do? How are you feeling? And a lot of the time, just knowing that there is someone there in case I need help. There's always someone who will answer a phone or who I can go and knock on the door and they will be there if I have any problem. That fact alone will make many feel safe. Sometimes a student, of course, will really need someone to listen to them, someone to give them advice, or someone to step in on their behalf if they need to talk to their teachers, to their mentor, if they find themselves in some difficult situation. The role of a Attune parent, I think, is difficult to describe only with a few short examples. Good parenting, I believe, can look very different because children are different and because circumstances are different. But if I have to kind of condense the Attune parent role into a short sentence, I would say that the main task is to provide the necessary support whenever it's needed. We have our weekly Attune times, our weekly gatherings where we are all together. Typically between 35 and 40 students living in Attune with their Attune parent. And when we're together, we always try to make time for some bonding activities. We might play a game of some sort. We try to listen to each other. We will probably discuss the latest development. This year, we have talked a lot about the COVID situation here in Armenia and globally. We are starting now to talk about what are the plans for the summer break. Will anybody have a hard time to go home, for instance? What is this? What is the situation right now? What is the thing that is first in your memory, in your you could say your thought activity? What is weighing on you right now? Sometimes this word parent in the Attune parent title also implies that we have to show care and the support in a way that the student might not necessarily enjoy in the moment. I am a parent of a couple of younger children myself, and I try continuously to strike the right balance between, of course, being a loving and a listening and a supportive parent, but I also know that I have to be the person that can be trusted to do what is in the best interest of my children, even if they don't agree in the moment that what I am doing is in their best interest. As a Attune parent, luckily I get to work with students who, for the most part, are mature enough to make predominantly good decisions. But of course, sometimes I will also need to sit down with someone to help them understand that the choices they make while they are being part of a bigger community will also have an impact on that community. And this can be many different things. Sometimes we will need to help someone understand that if you regularly shower and do your laundry, then that can really benefit the overall atmosphere in a room you share with 3 other people. Or we might help someone understand that you might be feeling a lot of stress right now, and it's probably in part due to the academic deadlines, but maybe it's also related to how many nights in the past week you prioritized to study or to socialize over actually getting enough sleep. Sometimes we need to help someone understand that why we have these fantastic students coming here, strong individuals with strong opinions and beliefs and excellent communication skills. We encourage them to be change makers, but it's not always the same as challenging every little rule that is in place in the community. So there can be the parenting part, which is really about helping someone change direction or understand that the direction they are on is not necessarily good for the community. Luckily, the Tune parenting role is mostly about, I would say, providing the support that is needed, whether it's emotional support, practical support, or simply encouragement. And I think also that this part of the role is particularly rewarding. And I think just like all my other Tune parent colleagues, I can say that I really enjoy getting to know and getting to understand these individual students better. It's fantastic to watch them grow and develop. It's always nice to celebrate with them when they discover some new strength or when they experience a success. Of course, at times the role is also about reinforcing the structure, the expectations, upholding certain standards so that life for our bigger community also continues to work. Sometimes helping them understand that actions have consequences. And if I primarily act with my own benefit in mind rather than the well-being of those around me, then there could also be unintended side effects. I think with all of this being said, that this school year in particular is extraordinary in so many ways. Not only here with us, but definitely also here. This constant state of lockdown, that means that most of our second year students, they miss being able to go to the supermarket or go to the park whenever they feel like it. And our first year students, they have heard a lot about what they are missing out on. When the opportunities are limited, sometimes this leads to some, I could call it a group mentality of focusing even more on the things you can do. That can be a really positive experience to take advantage of the opportunities that there are, but it can also lead to what might be experienced as an increasing academic pressure. And I think one of the challenges we are facing right now is that some students are feeling a lot of pressure. To some extent, some of the pressure coming as much from students comparing themselves to each other, that it's actually coming from the academic staff. That if all I can think about, if I have so much time to study, well, then I can become really good. But if I then compare myself to the others who seem to be doing even better, then that's kind of a vicious cycle that we are trying to break. It's a situation that, of course, we are very much aware of, and when we are in the middle of a situation like this, we try to regain focus on what we could call the bigger UWC experience. There's so much gold to be found in our community, even when we are confined to staying on campus. There are so many experiences, there's so much knowledge, there's so much more than just the IB. And we try to help our students focus on all the opportunities rather than whatever hindrances are in their way. We try to help them plan for the longer term rather than stressing over deadlines. And we try to help them make the very most of their time here. We try to reinforce again and again that there is this whole support system surrounding them. We have medical professionals, we have psychological support, we have personal emotional support, we have all of our teachers, our mentors, our peer listeners, our Tune parents, every other member of staff who is both ready to help and willing to help. To be a student at UWC Dilijan means temporarily making a different place your home. And we really want it to feel like a home. We don't always succeed at this 100% of the time, but we try to have as many approaches to support as possible both for our students, for staff, and for everyone in the community. So while this, of course, was in no way a complete picture of how we create or try to create a caring environment, I hope there was still some sense to some of these thoughts. You are still most welcome to ask questions, both regarding what has been said and maybe what you would have liked to hear about. And with that, I will round off and give the word to our peer listeners, Jade and Rue, about what it is they have been doing. So over to you.
All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Jade.
I'm Rue.
And we're both peer listeners here at UWCD. And essentially, what peer listeners do is we undergo training with Michele in order to be able to properly support and help our peers by talking with them and listening to them and helping them overcome the many different challenges they face here at UWC, whether they be academic or with things going on back home, social, etc.
And then to the same extent, we are taught to also take care of ourselves while doing the same job, because I feel like it's something that people sort of forget, that we are still students. We still have academic responsibilities. And I think something that we do that is emphasized during our training is that we should be in a position to take care of ourselves first, and to assess whether we're actually in a position to take care of somebody else before we take on the responsibility of taking care of somebody else, because we are able to inflict harm on another person while attempting to help them. But I think something that's important is to sort of explain the context of UWC when we did become peer listeners and now, because also something important to understand is, even though we have sort of resigned as peer listeners because other peer listeners have been chosen, the community still does come to peer listeners, like the old peer listeners, simply because they are used to us, and we have been a constant for the better part of a year. But I think the context.
Yeah, so obviously, as was mentioned a little bit beforehand, this year has been very different and new and challenging on so many levels, much more than in the past. Obviously, firstly, the second years, we were all sent home, finished our first year online, all while in the uncertainty of having no idea what COVID-19 even was, how it worked, whether we'd be able to come back on campus the next semester. And I think that the whole quarantine situation, obviously we had to do for everybody's health, but the quarantine and then aspects such as the COVID restrictions and limitations have had an impact on the way that social life, academic life, human interaction works on campus.
Mm-hmm. And I think that also goes with, for example, the breaches that happen. Not going into complete detail on that, I think from the peer listener side, something that we did try to encourage was communication among the students, to ensure that even though the Tune parents did try on their part to ensure that the Tunes continued to have the sense of home that they tried to have already currently, that we as students tried to make sure that there wasn't a lot of hostility, and there was some sort of communication, if it's honesty, if it's dialogue, whatever form of communication was needed. I mean, that's mainly the role that we do have on campus as peer listeners and as the administration sort of hand within the community. But I think another thing that is very significant within this year is how the first years have sort of responded to COVID. And I think right now, I think there's a huge disparity between how the second years and the first years feel. because second years currently, there's this not nostalgia, but feeling. This is the period in which we were told to go back home. But then also with first years, there's this feeling of whether they can go back home, whether the school would be able to open next term again, whether they'll be able to sit for SATs. I mean, they have increased stress levels simply because of the new
strands and
and priorities that they just now have as IBDP2 students, newly IBDP2 students, and now we have other stresses that we're now being relieved of, but now are just coming into. We're now uni students, most of us. And then another thing is with first years also not knowing the community, the UWC community. I mean, I think Stefan sort of touched on this and how a lot of students are very stressed with the IB diploma, like they're overcompensating with the IB diploma. And I think a large contributor to that is that a lot of first years came into the year and they sort of, they were met with the IB and not with UWC, as opposed to us who were met with UWC and going to Lake Sevan and bonding with our second years and
bonfires and parties.
Yes, and traditions. And I think also that's now another weight that second years have, and of which we have to sort of try to instill that into first years
before we
leave in 2.5 months.
Yeah, I think because of COVID and because of the extent of quarantine, but also because even once at least most of the school was out of quarantine, we still had restrictions around the limit of people that could gather at one time. A lot of things that normally happen in first term that allow the sense of community and the sense of UWC spirit to grow weren't able to happen. So yeah, I think there is rising pressure amongst second years to pass those along and to instill those feelings before we leave so that they can still be transmitted to future generations, even if our DP1s weren't able to have the full experience from the beginning due to these restrictions and due to the effect of COVID.
I think something that we would commend the administration for putting into effect was the fact that during quarantine, even though there were so many quarantine bubbles, both quarantine periods, which is last quarantine, this quarantine, there was a huge stress on mental health and the tune parents trying their best to make sure their tunees were doing okay. Teachers to a greater extent were attempting to make sure that all of the students were doing okay. And I feel as if to this regard, the students are grateful. And I feel like this is where it's sort of made obvious that it's more of a community and a lot of dialogue has progressed to this extent. But I think I don't know if we can answer some of the questions partially.
Yeah.
Okay, but like for some of the dialogues that have happened on the peer listener side have been, I think this year has been quite active for the peer listeners, where we have the major conversation has been around asking the school to take accountability for the fact that it tries to seek balance between the IB diploma and UWC, and that it can't expect a student to simply find it. And I think in sort of being the voice for the students, we have been met, I think this term, especially after quarantine, we have had very productive conversations. I think we had a meeting last week with the student parents and with the academic staff and the pastoral team. That was very productive. And I think in terms of communication, I think the school is going in a very forward-thinking,
positive direction.
Yes. And because in as much as we understand that adolescence does come with its own problems, and as an adolescent, as a specimen, we just harbor our own problems, but it's naive to assume and to just conclude that UWC and IB does not come with its own complexities and then not address those problems. I think that's something that that peer listeners have really been fighting for in the community. And we hope and we actually trust that the following peer listeners will continue that conversation and the pastoral team will strengthen that. Yeah. And then Carolina's.
Okay, yes, continue.
Carolina asked what we would say has been the biggest lesson that we as young adults have learned during the COVID times while dealing with the many unexpected challenges that COVID brought to us.
Good question.
I think personally, from my point of view, I think I've learned that not every, as a young adult, I think I've grown emotionally as a peer listener. And I think in this time, especially during when people were put back into quarantine and things like that, I think something that I realized even more so was that not every reaction is like, people are very reactionary. Like, for example, like, it's not like every person sort of needs their own type of care. And I think especially during trying times, and also I also learned to detach, because in as much as I was a peer listener, and I think my twin parent also talked to me about this, where as much as I was a peer listener, I also needed to take care of myself. And that's something that we also fall into that trap a lot, where we say we want to take care of people. People have just been put into quarantine. We're both in Attune that had to go back into quarantine as well. And we sort of wanted to take care of everyone while we also had academics, but then I sort of learned to detach, but also take care of other people, but then also to take care of myself first.
Yeah, I think generally COVID and quarantine and being on lockdown and dealing with all these unknowns while stuck on a campus surrounded by 200 other teenagers from all over the world has really just taught, well, one, as Ruth said, there's definitely been a lot of personal and emotional growth throughout this process. But I think as trying as these times have been, they've taught me a lot about the way I cope with difficult situations and how much I can deal with on my own versus when to seek help, whether that be from fellow peer listeners, other peers, or other members of the UWC community that I trust. So, and I think generally across the community, people have, in their own way, learned even more than, because obviously whenever you come to UWC, you're away from home for the first time. You no longer have your parents, your lifelong friends to fall onto. So in general, you learn your limits and how to take care of yourself and how to rely on the people around us. But I think especially in these times, that has been a huge lesson.
Yes, thank you very much to our peer listeners. I can see that we have a couple of questions. You have already addressed the one that was specifically for you. So thank you for that. The other one I would like to maybe also direct to Jan Michele. The question writes, or an anonymous attendee has written, what is the UWCD community doing well to help both as adolescents and staff to deal with the additional challenges that COVID-19 has added to their daily lives? And what remains a challenge for the community from the eyes of the students and the staff? So now we've kind of heard from the students. Maybe you have an input on that as well.
Yeah, sure. I mean, first of all, I want to thank you, Stefan, and also Ruan and Jade, because they were like trying to highlight also honestly, I think, the challenges that the community went through. I think that from my point of view, or from our point of view, we all try to go on, notwithstanding the big challenges that the COVID-19 like posed to our community life, which is not easy at all. Like many other schools, they have activities online. We feel, I would say, lucky to be here to have somehow like a semblance of like normal life, and to be able to meet each other in person, and for the students to go to class or to do some activities on campus, or then more recently also to have some supervised activities out of campus. So I think first of all, I think that we need to understand that what happens to, let's say, to the students and what happens to the staff is like very much interconnected. So if we try all to go on with our life, with our routine, not denying the challenges, but trying to show with personal example that it's possible to face these challenges, and also to learn from them. That's like the general approach that I would say we try to implement in the community, to try to take care of ourselves, take care of the students, take care of staff, and also to learn from this very difficult experience. More specifically, I think that we are more than what we have done. I think that I want to say what we are trying to do, because this is still going on. We are trying to use our formal settings in which students and staff can speak, and we're also trying to create additional settings in which we can share ideas, and with the keeping in mind that this can help us to process our experiences and also to face our challenges. And Jade and Ru were mentioning the session we had last week with academic staff, pastoral staff, and peer listeners, in order to try to discuss strengths and challenges, and also the impact of the COVID on the community, in order to use this space as a dimension in which we can work through, or we can start to work through the experience and the challenges of the moment of the community. And then, I guess that also the fact that the school has a robust system with the Attuned parents and the mentors and the medical team to support the students. This is also an asset, or like another tool that we use to take care of the whole community. Well, I think that what remains is actually some of the aspects of the challenge of the lockdown, because it's really difficult, I would say, for the students, like not to be able to go out and to live somehow confined on campus, even if the campus is like a cozy environment, but still any cozy environment becomes like also sometimes like difficult to deal with when it's not possible to go beyond the boundaries. And this remains still the point that we are still trying to face. But I would say that now there is like a good enough vibe in the community of trying to learn together and to collaborate, to have a dialogue on how we can use this time to learn effectively, and also to make this experience beautiful.
Yes, thank you, Gian Michele. If there are any more burning questions, then we would love to hear them. We're sort of approaching, otherwise, the end of our time together now. I will just add a few more words to what Gian Michele was just saying, both in terms of what we are doing well. I agree that the fact that we've actually been able to keep the campus open, to have 200 students on campus moving almost freely around, being able to go to class in person. For many of our students, if they compare to their friends around the world, that's actually a lot of freedom. Of course, we feel limited in being on campus. And one of the things I particularly noticed from what Gian Michele shared earlier was that part of adolescence is needing private time. And even on a regular year, that can be a challenge as a UWC student. You will be in a room with roommates, and it's difficult to find that private corner when you need it. But of course, it's even more so when you can't then take a walk somewhere off campus. Luckily, we have such a large area that if you really need a quiet corner, there's typically also one to be found somewhere. But it is a challenge that our students often face. And if I have to add one other challenge, I believe it's one that we share with very, very many people around the world. It's the uncertainty of how is the situation going to develop. We have now, for the past year, lived in kind of a continuous state of how is this going to end, or when is this going to be different, not knowing what's coming around the corner. What will be the new version of the disease? What will be the new restrictions on our ability to move freely? Will the vaccines work as we hope? There's still these uncertainties that we are facing with everybody else, and that is to some extent right now our new normal. And I think living in a normal sense of, we could say, uncertainty is not pleasant. But I think that we overall as a community are good at seeing the opportunities that we have, rather than continuing to focus on those uncertainties or on those doubts. There is one question that just popped in here. How is the school supporting staff so that they can support students better during these difficult times? I think I will try to answer that myself. I think that the school is trying their very best to support the staff. Of course, we are also faced with some of the same challenges. We are also not able to move as freely as we would like to, and face some of the same uncertainties. We would like to go back to our home countries to see our family, but there's quarantine and there's travel restrictions and there's all kinds of things that makes that difficult. However, I think that there's a lot of openness to acknowledging that this is a stressful time for all of us, to accept and kind of also it's completely acceptable to speak about the fact, of course, that we are all human. As Attuned parents, as teachers, as any other member of staff, we have our own periods of more stress than other. We have our own limitations. But what I like about this community is, like I stated earlier as well, that our students are also old and mature enough to understand this. Sometimes I make mistake because of being tired. I might overreact when I need to tell a student something because of my own state of mind rather than the student's state of mind. But they are old enough to understand, to accept an apology if that's what is needed. And I think that there is that support, there's that acceptance among the community that we are all human and we are all in a stressful time of our lives, because I think we are, with the uncertainty, with everything that's happening around the world. This is not easy. Then Michele, would you like to?
Yeah, no, I would like to add also that we are like designing and also implementing some more specific training for staff on mental health and how to support the mental health of students. So we have a regular session now, like once a week in the pastoral team, in which we can like work on the strengths and challenges of the theme, also from the point of view of how we can support the mental health of staff and students, and to how we can process our own challenges. And the school is also providing like the pastoral team with additional training on mainly on psychological skills and how to support the students. We're also trying to implement like a better communication between academic and pastoral staff, so that now staff can also discuss again what are the main challenges in this period, and how everybody can feel then empowered in order to also support the students in a better way, and also feel a sense of agency in taking initiative to give a contribution to community life. And I would say then, as also like Stefan was mentioning, the added value, I think, is really the community. I mean, we all feel that we are not here only as individuals, but we are here as part of a bigger community inspired by bigger ideals, and we are trying to navigate these times using what is sometimes called like a negative capability, the ability to move on even if we don't have all the answers, but with the possibility to share honestly our concerns and use our skills in order to provide students with the best support possible, both for learning and well-being, and also with the best effort in order to make the community a nice and cozy and welcoming place and a caring place for everybody that is here.
Thank you, Gian Michele. As far as I'm aware, we have answered the questions that were asked. So we have also used the time that was allotted for us from the beginning. So I would just like to thank you all for being here. Thank you for joining us. And it was a pleasure to spend some time with you virtually. We hope to be able to welcome people in person again sometime soon. But we appreciate having these opportunities to be with our extended community. So thank you for being here, and have a good evening or good day, depending on the time where you are.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you.